Now we are going to open our economy to international trade. That's why we are going to have two economies instead of one. One of them is going to be home while the other is going to be foreign. We are going to assume that the preference of the consumers in each economy is going to be the same. Okay, so it's like the population has the same taste all across the world, okay, or our small world with just two economies. Let's say that also the technology is the same, okay? We already know that technology is going to have an effect, but now we just want to isolate the effect of resources. So that's why we are going to assume that technology is equal across the world. And the main difference, as I said, is going to be the resources in each economy, where resources are the production factors, which can be labor or capital. Now, to see which economy is more abundant in terms of one production factor versus the other, we need to make this kind of a ratio, okay? And we are going to assume that for the home economy, that's why I don't put the star, while for the foreign economy, I'm going to use this symbol, okay? So, if you see something like that, the thing that you are observing is the home economy use more labor per capital. So it's not that use more of one over the other. It has, because this is the resources of the economy, okay? So the home economy has more workers per machines in the whole economy than the foreign economy. Or what is the same, the foreign economy is going to have more capital per worker than the home economy. So that's why we can, it's the same thing, okay? The only thing that I made is change the order, and then you're going to get the opposite sign here, okay? It's like this go here, and this go here, and vice versa here as well. This and this is the same, they are equivalent. So if we know that the home economy is labor abundance, we know also that the foreign economy is going to be capital abundance, okay? And that always is going to be in relative terms. So imagine that we have here for, information for the home economy and here for the foreign economy. This is labor and this is capital. You can see that in both cases, in this case, in both for both production factors, foreign have more units than home. 20 is higher than 10 and 20 is higher than 5. But in relative terms, and that is the way of observing which economy is more abundant in one of the production factors, in ratio, relative terms, we can observe that home has more labor per machine, because this is 2, it's like each machine is going to be used by 2 workers. While in the foreign economy, 20 over 20 is 1, that means we have 1 worker per machine. Well, machine is capital, of course. You see now that in home we have more labor per machine than in foreign. That's why home is going to be labor abundance, while foreign is going to be capital abundance. Okay? Now we are able to see which economy is going to be abundant in one specific production factor, while the other always is going to be just in the opposite. Now, we are going to see how is the way of determining the ratio of the relative price of food or clothes, which is the same for the foreign economy, for the home economy. Later on, we are going to see the PPF in each economy and how is the level of production given the ratio of prices. Now we are going to see how is the way of determining the relative price of clothes in the market of clothes, and at the same time food, of course, because it's in relative terms. Because we know that consumers are equal in both economies, that is going to involve an equal relative demand, okay, in each economy. And that is something really useful, because it's going to allow us drawing both markets in just one graph. Here we are going to have that market, so we are talking about the market of goods. Here we have the price. In fact, we have the relative price of clothes, and here we have the relative quantity of clothes over food, okay? So prices, quantity, the demand is going to be the same in both markets, so that's why we just have one relative demand. You can see that the slope is negative, as usual. Why is that? Because negative means that if one of the variables increase, the other decrease. Here we have prices over quantity. So as higher is the price, lower is the quantity demanded. Of course, it makes sense. And when the price of this good is decreasing, the quantity demanded, keep in mind series here for both sides. So as lower is the price, closer to zero in the vertical, higher is the quantity demanded in the horizontal, and vice versa, okay? That is the demand. What about the relative supply? We know that here we are talking about the relative supply of clothes. So it means that it's relative supply. So it means that even in the case that the foreign economy has a higher amount of labor and a higher amount of capital, as we had in the previous example, that was 20 and 20 versus 10 labor in the home economy and 5 capital in the home economy. Even in that case, when labor was 20 and capital was 20 in the foreign economy, so that means it is able to produce more than the home economy for both goods, because we're talking about the relative supply. So this is higher and this is higher, the ratio can be smaller. And in fact, it's going to be smaller in the case of clothes. Why is that? Because we observed that the economy that was relatively abundant in labor was home. And for producing clothes, you need more labor than capital, because it was clothes intense. So that means that in relative terms, the home economy, which is relatively abundant in labor, is going to be the one with a higher relative supply of clothes. That's why the red one is going to be for the home economy, while the blue one is going to be for the foreign economy. Here we have the supply. Supply has a positive slope. Why is that? Because as higher is the price of something, there's going to be more supply. There's going to be more companies that want to produce, because the benefit can be higher. Okay, that's why it's a positive, the relationship. We observe this difference is indicating that this relative supply is higher than this one, because we are talking about quantity. More quantity supplied means that here we have the quantity, so in the horizontal, it means like this is going to be higher than this, because this is in the right side. Being more in the right side means being more far away from the zero, so also involve higher values. Okay, so just looking at this graph, we are able to observe that this economy is going to have a higher supply of, we are talking about clothes over food, so a relative supply of clothes. While the foreign economy is going to have a lower relative supply of clothes, which means that instead of using this, we just change the opposite. This is going to change as well, because we know that the foreign economy is relatively abundant in the capital production factors, so its relative supply of food is going to be higher than in the home economy. Now let's see where is the equilibrium in each case. We know that equilibrium is the point in which the demand meets the supply. So for the home economy, it's going to be here. The relative demand is the same for both economy. Here we have the relative supply of home. So this is going to be the quantity demanded and at the same time supplied in the market, so the quantity of equilibrium. And here we're going to have the relative price of clothes in the equilibrium situation. And now looking for the foreign supply, relative supply, and the relative demand, here we have the equilibrium in the foreign economy. So this is the relative quantity of equilibrium, here we have the relative price. What is something interesting that we are observing here? The home economy is going to have a higher production of equilibrium or relative production of clothes than the foreign economy, and as well because the supply is really high, it's not just more production, it's also lower prices. Of course, when the supply of something is really high or higher than in another place, we should expect that in the place where the supply is really high, the quantity produced and demanded is going to be higher and prices are going to be smaller. While in the economy with goods that are in a lower production, so the relative supply of those goods are smaller, that is going to involve a lower quantity of equilibrium and also higher prices. So we know, without looking the opposite case, I mean food over clothes, without looking that graph, we also know that the opposite is going to happen for the food good. So that means that the quantity produced and consumed in the foreign economy of food is going to be higher than at home, and the relative price of food is going to be smaller in the foreign economy than in the home economy. Now we are going to connect these two relative prices with the PPF curve of each economy, and then we are going to get the quantity, okay? Well, it's going to be separated, quantity of food versus quantity of clothes, but it's going to be connected with all of this. So here we have the PPF of each economy. So this is for the home economy, this is for the foreign economy. You can observe that the home economy, which is labor abundant, is able to produce more, well, here is in even absolute terms, but also we can see that in relative terms, respect to the production of food, but is able to produce more clothes than the foreign economy and less food than the foreign economy. So in general, we should expect something like this. Okay, this is going to be like more steeper in general, the slope than here. What is going to be the relative price? Well, we know that the relative price of clothes here is going to be cheaper than here, as we saw in the previous graph, because the relative supply of clothes in the home economy was higher than in the foreign economy, given the fact that this was labor abundant. So that's why the slope of this ratio of prices is flatter than in this case, which is steeper. Just keep in mind or remember that steeper is when you go up really fast, and flatter is when it is something like this. So this is steeper than this one. In this case, we are in a context of closed economy. Here we have the production. Of course, because each economy is closed, we know that the production of each good, production of clothes and production of food must be equal to the consumption. And we know that consumption is coming from the point in which the ratio of prices is touching or is tangent to the indifferent curves. We have many indifferent curves, but no, by sure, one of them is going to be in a place like this. Okay, different curves. Well, should be more close to here. That is for the home economy. Something like this is going to be for the foreign economy. Okay, so production and consumption, when each economy is closed, is in the same point. Production of clothes and consumption of clothes, and the same with the other good, and the same with the other economy. Now let's go to open these two economies. Now we know that that is going to involve a change in the relative price of clothes. In fact, we should expect that because this economy is abundant in the labor production factor, so it's able to give a really high supply of clothes, of relative supply of clothes, with a relatively low price of clothes, while this has higher prices and lower quantity, we know that part of this production is going to be supplied to this economy. In fact, the supplier of clothes here are going to be really happy. Why? Because they are going to be able to export at higher price. In fact, they are going to raise the price of clothes. This economy is going to be happy with that as well. How can be that possible? Because the price of clothes here, it was really high. So these people, the consumer of clothes here, are going to be happy just if they find a smaller reduction on the price of that good. And that is the thing that is going to happen. So eventually the relative price of clothes is not going to be so small as this, neither so high as this. It's going to be in a point in between. Okay? Later on I'm going to show you that relative demand and the new relative supply, but now it's going to be global for the whole economy. Instead of home versus foreign, it's going to be just one. And you're going to see how that relative supply is going to give us a relative price of clothes between those that we had previously. So, because we know that the new international relative price of clothes is going to be higher than this and smaller than this, we should expect a new line of for the ratio of prices. So it has to be steeper than this. Let's take a point like this, for instance. Here is steeper, you see? In fact, we know, because the opportunity cost of clothes is increasing, we know that when we move from any point from here to any point from here, the slope of the PPF is going to be higher. And in fact, we are looking for a higher slope because we know that the new prices, the international one, the new relative price of clothes in an international context is going to be higher. So that slope has to be higher, and the only points in which the PPF has a higher slope is here in the right side. Okay? So that's why it's going to be here and never here. So let's imagine that this is the new prices of clothes. Let's put I for international. Okay, in both quotes. So production is going to be here. That means this economy now is going to produce. I'm going to use the P for production, okay? Well, it must be quantity produced. Let's put things right, okay? Quantity produced in the clothes market is going to be here, while the quantity produced, now production and consumption is not the same. We are looking just production in this first step because we are looking the PPF, so the production possibility, what I can produce, and the ratio of prices. Just remember that the ratio of prices is going to determine the remuneration of the production factors, and is the thing that is going to change the output of the economy. So, because now the relative price of clothes is bigger, we should expect like more allocation of the goods, of the production factor in that industry, because now it's like better producing clothes than food, and that is the thing that is going to generate a higher production of clothes with respect to the starting point, right? So, as I said, we are talking about production. Here, ratio of prices, the new ratio of prices, the PPF, so the production that is possible, is going to generate a lower production of food. Lower with respect to the starting point, I mean, when we were in a closed economy. And that is just production. Later on, we are going to see what is consumption. Now we're going to do just the same thing, but for the foreign economy. we knew that for the foreign economy the relative price of clothes was really high. Now it's going to be a little bit smaller. It's going to be in a point between this value, the value of this slope, and the value of this slope. As we know, it's going to be this value. So we should have a line with the same slope as this one and put that line here touching the PPF. So let's see something like, it's a little bit difficult to do, so use your imagination. So it must be a point like, let me see, boop. So I know that it's going to be flatter than this, so for instance, something like this. I'm sorry. Okay, so this line must be parallel to indicate that both of them have to have the same slope. Use this symbol, okay? So where is going to be the production, more or less, like a point like this, for instance. This is the new relative prices in an international context. Food, international, okay. So let's see that now the quantity produced of cloth in the foreign economy is smaller because the producers are deciding to reduce the production of that good and employ the production factors in the other industry where they are more efficient. And here you can observe that the quantity supplied or produced of food now, production food, foreign food, sorry, is higher than in that autarky context. Okay? Now we are going to see where is the consumption. So we knew that consumption is the point in which the ratio of prices is touching one of the indifferent curves. In fact, we have like a map of indifferent curves. There are many, but it's really confusing just introducing all of them. That's why we just choose one. Which one? The one that is touching that line, but also at the same time is the one that is more far away from the 0, 0 case. Why is that? Because as far as you are from this point, 0 in the horizontal, 0 in the vertical, is because you are like consuming more, so you are going to be more happy. The utility associated with that indifferent course that is really far away is going to be always higher than the indifferent course that is really close to this point. Utility here is smaller than when you are consuming a lot, because we always assume that people want to consume. Okay, so I know also that it has to be parallel to this one, because the indifferent curves never cross one between each other. Okay, always they are parallel. So let's find a point which is more or less parallel. Let's see, it's a little bit difficult. For instance, this point. This is a new indifferent course, okay? That was the first one, now we have that. And let's assume that here is the point in which they are tangent. So we observe that this, eventually, this is going to be the consumption of that good in the home economy. Consumption of those in the home economy. Where here we are going to have the consumption of food in the home economy. Consumption of food in the home economy when this economy has opened the barrier to international trade. Of course, take care that this point is not feasible in a closed economy context. Why is that? Because my possibility of production is here. I'm not able to produce a quantity like this. And in terms of clothes, we are outside of the PPF, so it's not possible. That is just possible when we have international trade. So production always has to be here. As you observe, production is here where the PPF. You can produce more than your PPF is telling you that you can do it. But in an open international context, you can consume more than what you can produce. But production always is going to be in the PPF. Is consumption the thing that can be outside of the PPF? In fact, always is going to be outside when you are introducing the international trade framework. Let's see now where is the consumption in the foreign economy. So we have here the new relative prices. In fact, we know that the new indifferent curves must be parallel to this one, so let's consider a point like this. Okay, so here is the consumption of food. Here is going to be the consumption of clothes. So let's put C for consumption, food, foreign economy. Let's put here, it's here, consumption, clothes, foreign economy. And now, in each case, we are going to see what is the amount of production and consumption and determine how is that possible. So, what is export and what is import. This economy now is producing more clothes than before. In fact, it's producing, because we have the P here, it's producing more clothes than the consumption of clothes. How is that possible? What's going on with this production that is really high? Well, we know that when an economy is producing more than the thing that it's consuming, it's because that economy is exporting. So this is the export of this economy. He has specialized in the production of clothes. Nevertheless, always is going to produce something of food as well. The Ricardian model is not this case, because with the Ricardian model, one economy just produces one thing and nothing of the other good. But here we are going to have the production of both good. But this economy is going to focus more in the good in which it has an abundance in the production factor in the industry which is intense, in the production factor that is abundance in that economy. Let's see what's going on with the food. Well, production is here, you see the P. Consumption is here, it's higher the consumption than the production. How is that possible? How is the way that we are consuming more than our production? That is just only possible because we are importing that good. So this is the import. And here we have the other side of the same coin. If this is export here, when we are exporting clothes, it's in exchange of food. We are importing food. So we should expect that this economy is going to export food, the food that this economy is importing, while it's going to import, the foreign economy is going to import clothes, which is the clothes that is exporting from the home economy. Let's see. So here we have production of clothes, consumption. Consumption is higher than production. This economy is importing. What is importing? What this economy is exporting. Here we have production, and here we have consumption. So the production is higher than the consumption is because that production, this value minus this value, this production that is not consumed is exporting. So this export is what the other economy is importing. Now let's see the income implication of these international trade openings, or these open to international trade. Okay, we are observing that the relative price of clothes now is higher. Remember, the relative price of clothes was connected with the ratio of wage over rental. In fact, a higher relative price of clothes means a higher wage over rental. So we should expect, and also at the same time means that each industry is going to demand less labor per capita because the cost of labor per capita is higher. Okay, it was everything. But now I want to focus just in implication, in the income distribution implication. The increase in the price of clothes, or relative price of clothes, also means a higher wage or relative wage over rent or interest rate. So the owners of labor are going to be the winners, while the owners of capital are going to be the losers of this economy. How is that? Because though the relative price of clothes increased for both of them, the increase of the ratio of the wage over rental, this increase, it was higher than the increase of the price. So these people, the owner of labor who get the wages, are going to be better off than these people, because though prices have increased, the increase of wages is higher. So in relative terms, when you are not just considering wage, also considering the price, that is the interesting thing, the purchasing power of these people now is higher than before, while the purchasing power of the owner of capital now is lower than before. So given the money that they are getting using their production factors, owner of capital, and given the increase of prices, now they are able to buy less than before, less units of goods than before. Okay, that are also the implication of this model. In the other economy, we are going to observe the opposite. So who is going to be better off? Well, the people who is working in the food industry, because this economy has more capital than labor, so the owner of capital are going to produce more, because now they have to satisfy the other economy, and also with higher prices than at the beginning. And more prices means that they are going to be paid with a higher wage. And because it's basically their capital, so the remuneration of capital of that specific sector is going to be, or production factor is going to be higher than the other one. Okay? Here I'm coming back to that market of clothes and food at the same time, to give you the idea how was the way in which prices, or the relative price of clothes, changed when these two economies opened to international trade. Just remember, here we had the relative price of clothes, the relative quantity of clothes, and this was the relative demand of clothes in each economy is equal. So here we're going to introducing the market of these goods in each economy, but at the same time, because the relative demand is the same for both of them. If you remember, the relative supply of clothes was higher in home than in the foreign economy. So that was why the relative price of home was smaller. Here is 0, so this number is smaller than this. And the relative quantity of equilibrium was higher in the home economy, it's this point, while the quantity of equilibrium in the foreign economy was that before international trade. What's going on with international trade? So this economy now is going to supply both the economy. So that means the relative supply in the home economy is not going to be so high, but at the same time, in the foreign economy, the relative supply of this good is going to increase. How is that? Now, because the home economy is also exporting there. So in both economies, we are going to observe a change in the relative supply. In the home, the relative supply is not going to be so high, while in the foreign economy, that small relative supply of clothes now is not going to be so small. At the end, both of them are going to be equal in each economy, and it's going to be in a place between the two balls that we had initially. So this is like the relative supply now in the international context. So once you have opened your barriers to trade, each economy is going to have the same supply of that good, because now both economies are open, so each of them is going to have the same access to those goods. So that's why in each economy, the production supplier is going to be between the previous one, and here, and more importantly, we have the new relative price. And we already know that new international relative price of clothes is going to be smaller than in the foreign case and higher than in the domestic case. Now to conclude, I just want you to remind you that this is just a theoretical model. The reality is much more complex than this. In fact, we already know that technology is different. It's important, the differences of technology, and it's going to have an effect. So, here you have some conclusion that is going to indicate part of the reality. So, in fact, it's important considering how the production of each good is intense in the use of the different production factors, and also it's really important to observing what is the production factor that is abundant in its economy, okay? It's like when we are observing countries like India or China with a lot of population, we should expect, and in real life we're observing that those economies are going to produce those goods which are more intense in labor, while other smaller economies like Japan, with more capital per worker, they are going to produce those goods that are more intense in capital, okay? Nevertheless, as I said, this is going to just give us some clues to understand international trade and how we should expect is going to be the flow of export from one economy and import from other economies.